Just meet my little buddy here again. That's my little hamster. There he is. Okay. So, he could be working with me a little bit. Most of these poems are so much better when you have some sense of what they can sound like. Our interpretations can be different, but it's important to have some sense of, the musicality of the poem. I mean, where is it loud? Where is it soft? The dynamics. Where is it smooth and flowing? Where is it like staccato? So all these musical terms apply rather remarkably. Oh, are you crooked there? Yeah, you are a little crooked. Rather remarkably to poems. What'd you say? You want to take a look at E. E. Cummings' poem? Okay, well, all right, fine. Let's take a look at the one on 71. How would you read this the way E. E. Cummings does this? These are not standard iambic pentameter, to be sure, right? So, what would you do with this? So, in just spring, when the world is mud luscious, the little lame balloon man whistles far, and we and Eddie and Bill come running from marbles and piracies, and it's spring when the world is puddle wonderful. The queer old balloon man whistles far, and we and Betty and Isabel come dancing from hopscotch and jump rope, and it's spring, and the goat-footed balloon man whistles far, and we. Did you get the goat-footed deal? What is that reference about? I want you to think about that. In fact, if you figure out what that reference is, right, you can look down at the bottom. You learn so much from poetry. An allusion to the satyrs. What were those guys? Well, they were lewd. They were indeed. They were more lewd than even I am. So sometimes poems can be deceptively simple, I guess. But I know some of you sort of really agonized over the supposed complexity of poems, but what about a poem like on 73, Tips from My Father? And of course it's very autobiographical according to the intro to it. But again, I want you to be a little careful. The poem has typically a persona, although some modern poems are admittedly very autobiographical. You have to be careful. The persona is a speaker in the poem, not necessarily the poet himself or herself. And so you have to be careful. Frost is not necessarily the figure in A Road Not Taken or Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. It's his poem. The persona is the speaker. So be familiar with that term. Be aware of that. Okay. So this is the Caroline Davis poem, Tips from My Father. And it's so remarkable, I think, in many ways, but it reminds us of a lot of dads, mine included. Come out here, he'd call from the yard. I want to show you Mars. I'd stand just in front of him, follow his finger up into the sky, the house spinning away from us till nothing mattered but my father's hand and his 100 planets, and his voice paused before he found it. Then, there it is. And maybe I saw it. This is how he taught me, in case I was ever lost at sea or in the desert, how to navigate my way back home. With each new season, a new sky to learn, a serious business like reading a map. Look here, he'd say. This is something you might need. So, it's more, right? It's more than, Mars. It's more than, constellation. It's that passing on of something you might need. Something you might later need to help you through the journey called life. And dads do that, right? So so many amazing poems, one of which is, I'm going to turn back a little bit, and to My Last Duchess. So I want you to turn there with me. And that's on page 41. And what kind of a guy is this speaker? Browning wrote his poems about by speakers. And they just start talking. It's a dramatic monologue, right? And when you read that, you are supposed to, in some sense, hear that voice of that person, what sort of individual that is. So, did you read it carefully, or did you just kind of, oh yeah, okay, well, My Last Duchess, I already read that. Now I'm going to read the next one. Or did you have to read these a bunch of times for them to really work on you, for you and on you? So, Ferrara. And so here is the Duke, so to speak. What? You want to do this? No, you're resting. Okay, you said it. That's My Last Duchess, painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder. Now, Frau Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, that depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, and, since none puts by the curtain, I have drawn for you, but I, and seemed as if they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps o'er my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-blush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one. My favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherry some officious fool broke an orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even if you had skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one and say, just this or that in you disgusts me. Here you miss, or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, e'en then would be some stooping, and I chose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew. I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. There she stands, as if alive. Will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below, then. I repeat, the Count, your master's known munificence, is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self, as I vowed, at starting is my object. Nay, we'll go down together, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. Okay, well, I don't know if you got some idea of this guy, and that's just my way of doing it. But he's a manipulator, he's power mad, he is absolutely cruel, he is egomaniacal, he is subtle, and notice the symbols. Well, the last especially. Well, first you've got the painting, which captures the Duchess. And then you've got this image, symbolic really, at the end of the taming of the seahorse. Thought a rarity. So he tames people. He wanted to tame her. And he wanted her to react just the way he wanted her to react. And if she did not react the way he wanted, then he became insulted, and more the world closed in on her. And so eventually she died a suspicious death. But she's preserved, I guess, in memory and in image, sort of like that poor little old seahorse tamed. Wow, isn't that chilling? I mean, this guy's, well, he's an abuser, right? 16th century, is it? But, yeah. 1558. He's an abuser. Classic. So that's his voice. Well, okay. So you got a test coming up. I was going to mention too. I mean, you got a test, you got a paper, and I'm going to try to help you with this. I think you need to remember all that you can say about a poem is so much. Physically, literally. What is the poem about literally? What is the literal meaning that is just on the surface of it? What are the suggestive levels of meaning? Figurative, symbolic? Does the poem have a theme? Does it have any of those other elements of a short story? What about the rhythms in the poem? Can you do a little something with that? Is it rather unorthodox, like an E. Cummings poem, but yet it works a very remarkably auditory type of poem, verbally? What are the words in the poem? The diction. You can look at that. You can look at one huge concept, and that is image. Does the poem set off sensations in us? Auditory, touch, sensations of touch, visual images. So images are not all they're physical and they evoke the senses, but they're not certainly all visual by any means. So there are so many ways in that you can use with poetry. But if you jot these down and you add to the catalog of what I say, just what can I say about a poem? You don't have to be mystified. It's not some sort of black magic. It's just a matter of, you can actually be sort of systematic about it, right? You can do that. But there's much that you can say about a poem. You need to realize that. Okay,